I'll be honest with you, I was completely blindsided. After 10 years of marriage, I genuinely believed Claire and I had everything under control. Our life seemed solid: a charming house in the suburbs, stable careers, and the freedom to travel whenever we wanted. I thought we were one of those couples who had it all together, the kind you see in perfect Instagram snapshots. But this was our real life. So, you can only imagine my shock when, one evening during dinner, Claire dropped a bombshell that shattered my world. The night started like any other. I returned home from work, feeling a bit worn out but eager for a peaceful dinner with her. She had prepared my favorite dish, lasagna, and poured us each a glass of wine. Everything felt normal, even comforting, until she blindsided me with a suggestion that hit me like a slap to the face. Out of nowhere, she said, "I've been thinking. We should add some spice to our marriage. Maybe try something adventurous." At first, I tried to brush it off, chuckling nervously. What? Like a new hobby? Rock climbing? Salsa dancing? But the look in her eyes told me this wasn't just a playful idea. Her expression was serious, almost eager, and then she laid it out there. "I'm talking about a threesome, Ryan, with another man." I swear, time seemed to freeze at that moment. I remember staring at her, struggling to process what I had just heard. My mind was racing, bombarded with questions. Where the hell did this come from? Why would she want this? And why another man? Wasn't I enough for her? I managed to stammer. Why do you want to do that? Is there something I'm not providing for you?" My voice came out weak, as if it didn't even belong to me. She simply shrugged and mentioned exploring new experiences and adding excitement to our marriage. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The more she talked about these new experiences, the more it felt like a rehearsed pitch rather than a spontaneous idea. Her tone was too practiced, too smooth, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for quite some time. "Are you serious right now?" I exclaimed, my fork clattering onto my plate. "You're genuinely suggesting that we invite another guy into our bed? What the hell, Claire?" Her reaction made my blood boil. She treated me like I was the unreasonable one, calling me uptight and saying I was too conservative about sex. "Don't you ever think about trying something different? Or are you just going to be boring and stuck in your ways forever?" she snapped, tossing her napkin onto the table. Boring? Conservative? This was the same woman who used to rave about how much she loved our sex life, claiming how connected we were. Now, apparently, I was just some narrow-minded husband stifling her desires. We quickly descended into an argument, the lasagna left untouched on our plates as tensions escalated. I accused her of trying to sabotage our marriage, of ruining the intimacy we had. And you know what her response was? She laughed. It wasn't a light-hearted laugh. It was cold and mocking, as if she found my confusion amusing. That hurt more than anything. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been blindsided, that the life we had built together was some cruel joke. Then, as if to minimize it all, she brushed it off like it was no big deal. "It's just an idea, Ryan. You don't need to get all defensive. I thought we could explore, that's all." But there was something in her gaze, an edge, a glimmer, that hinted this wasn't merely about exploring. It felt as though she was testing me, or perhaps covering up something far more serious. That night, we went to bed angry, the silence heavy and oppressive between us. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, all I could do was replay that conversation over and over. Each time she said, "new experiences," it sounded more like a facade than a genuine suggestion. Doubts crept in, one after another. What if she was already cheating on me, and this was just her way of normalizing it? Why was she so adamant about it? It felt like she was envisioning someone else sharing our bed. She turned away from me in bed, feigning sleep, but I knew better. The tension was palpable, and I could sense her shallow, restless breaths. I instinctively tried to put my arm around her, but she shrugged me off, muttering, "Not now, Ryan." That's when it hit me. Things weren't going to revert back to normal after this. Something had shifted, and I was beginning to realize just how little I actually understood what was going on inside her head. I fell asleep with a gnawing unease in my gut, like the ground beneath me was crumbling away and I was about to fall through. That's how it all began. Just an ordinary dinner at home, flipped upside down in an instant. Looking back, I see that night as the beginning of the end. All I knew at the time was that I had to figure out what was really happening with Claire. This wasn't just some wild suggestion. It felt like something far more significant and sinister was lurking beneath the surface. And I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how deep I had to dig. If that dinner conversation was a slap to the face, what followed felt like a relentless gut punch. Things got strange, quickly. Sure, Claire and I had our ups and downs over the years like any couple, but this was a different ballgame. After that night, her behavior changed drastically, making her seem like a stranger living in my own home. She had always been open about her phone. We'd share pictures, memes, and silly videos we stumbled upon, normal couple stuff. But now, it was like she was glued to it. She kept it face down on the table or tucked securely in her pocket, locked away as if it contained the world's most precious secret. And the feeling of suspicion, it wrapped around my throat like a snake, tightening with each passing day. It all began with small things, you know. I'd overhear her whispering conversations in another room, her voice dropping to a hush whenever I happened to walk by. Whenever I asked her who she was talking to, she'd just shrug it off casually, saying, "Oh, just a friend," as if it was nothing worth worrying about. But the hurried tone in her voice made it impossible for me to dismiss it. Every time I caught a glimpse of her phone, there would be a notification flashing up and she'd swipe it away before I could even catch a name. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. There was someone else in the picture. There had to be. My thoughts kept circling back to that dinner when she had brought up the idea of a threesome so unexpectedly. In a sick, twisted way, it all started to make sense. She wasn't just looking to explore our marriage. She was already getting her kicks with someone else, and I was just the oblivious husband being fed some bullshit story about new experiences. I attempted to have a real conversation with her. I'd try to bring it up during those quiet, late-night moments when we were supposed to be winding down, hoping she might finally open up. "Claire, is there something you're not telling me?" I'd ask, striving to keep my voice steady. But she always shot me down. "You're just being paranoid, Ryan. Not everything is a conspiracy. You need to relax." But I knew better. I could feel it deep in my bones that something wasn't right. Every smile she flashed my way felt forced, and every kiss seemed more like a duty than a sign of affection. She was physically present, but mentally, she was miles away, most likely with someone else. Then, one fateful morning, I got my opportunity. She had this habit of hopping into the shower first thing after waking up, and on that particular day, she left her phone sitting on the nightstand, unlocked. It felt like the universe was handing me a lifeline, and I had mere seconds to decide whether to grab it. I knew it was wrong. I knew diving into her phone was crossing a line, but the gnawing feeling in my gut had grown too intense to ignore. So, I took a deep breath, grabbed her phone, and started scrolling. It didn't take long for me to find what I was searching for. There they were, messages with a guy named Mark. The name didn't ring any bells, but the way they conversed left no room for doubt about what was happening. Explicit messages. Every filthy word struck me like a punch to the gut, and the worst part was the nonchalance of it all. They were discussing meetups, detailing what they wanted to do to one another, and that's when I stumbled upon it. They were planning a threesome, the same experiment Claire had so casually suggested at dinner. But from their tone, this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment idea. This was premeditated, carefully plotted. Every message felt like a dagger, piercing deeper and deeper. I scrolled back, desperate to find out how long this had been happening. Weeks? Months? The more I read, the more my stomach twisted. I could see her messaging him late at night after I'd fallen asleep beside her, believing we were sharing our lives and dreams. Meanwhile, she was dreaming of someone else. And Mark. He wasn't just some random guy. He was the guy, the one she wanted to invite into our bed to be part of this twisted experiment. The realization slammed into me like a brick wall. She wasn't suggesting a threesome because she wanted to explore our relationship. No, she was proposing it because she wanted him, and she thought slapping the label of adventure on it would make everything okay. I felt utterly foolish, a complete, clueless fool. What stung the most were the messages where she spoke about me, how uptight I was, how she wished I could be more like Mark, open-minded, willing to explore. My wife was comparing me to some stranger she'd met God knows where, belittling me in their sordid exchanges. I couldn't bear to read another word. My hands trembled and I felt like I might vomit right there in our bedroom. This was my wife, the woman I had loved for over a decade, the one I'd vowed to stand by through thick and thin. And she was hiding all of this right under my nose while I played the part of the devoted husband, blissfully unaware. I carefully placed her phone back where I found it, my head spinning. I could hear the water still running in the shower, blissfully ignorant of the fact that I'd just uncovered her dirty little secret. I didn't know what to do next. My mind was a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, all crashing down on me at once. But one thing was crystal clear. I couldn't just let this slide. She was plotting to dismantle our marriage under the guise of exploration, and I refused to sit back and let her do it. So I took a deep breath, tried to collect myself, and made a decision right then and there. I wouldn't confront her, not yet anyway. No, I was going to play my cards wisely. If she wanted to play dirty, then I'd play smarter. And when the moment was right, I would ensure she regretted every lie, every secret, and every message she had sent to Mark. This wasn't just about Claire and Mark anymore. It was about me taking back control. Whatever game she thought she was playing, I would be the one to have the final word. If Claire wanted to toss our marriage into chaos, she better be prepared for the storm I was about to unleash. Once I discovered those messages on Claire's phone, there was no turning back. It felt as though the blinders had finally been removed, and I could see everything for what it truly was. The lies, the secrets, the manipulation. It all started to fall into place. But instead of confronting her immediately and giving her the satisfaction of some dramatic showdown, I made a choice. I wouldn't be the fool who lost control. No, if Claire wanted to mess around behind my back, I would make sure she understood precisely what that felt like. The trick was to maintain the facade of normalcy. I didn't want to give anything away, so I acted nonchalant, almost too nonchalant. Each morning, I'd wake up, go through the same routine, kiss her good morning as if everything were perfectly fine, and pretend I hadn't caught on to anything. Yet, each touch felt hollow, devoid of the warmth it once had. My heart just wasn't in it, and before long, a thick distance settled between us like an ominous cloud. Claire, however, seemed oblivious, perhaps too wrapped up in whatever fantasy world she was sharing with Mark to notice the shift. Either way, it gave me the space I needed to plot my next steps. It's funny how the realization of betrayal alters your perspective on everything. I found myself watching her every move more closely, observing how she'd light up when she looked at her phone, how she'd smile at texts when she thought I wasn't looking, and those late nights she spent in the living room claiming she was watching TV when I knew she was texting him. Instead of feeling infuriated, a cold detachment began to settle in. It was as if I were dissecting her actions, preparing to pull the rug out from under her when the moment was right. Weeks passed like this, and the emotional chasm between us only widened. We stopped engaging in meaningful conversation. Instead, it was all surface-level drivel. "How was your day?" "Fine." "What do you want for dinner?" "I don't know. You choose." Just that empty small talk that filled the silence but meant nothing. I could see it in her eyes. She thought she had outsmarted me, that she was getting away with something. But little did she know, the joke was on her. Then, one fateful night, everything changed. A friend invited me to a bar for a reunion with some old pals I hadn't seen in years. At first, I was hesitant. But when I imagined spending another night at home with Claire, pretending to be the oblivious, devoted husband while she was likely plotting her next encounter with Mark, the decision became easy. I needed to escape, to breathe. And that's when I met Sophie and Emma. That night started off like any other, with no expectations, just some drinks and laughter to take the edge off. But then they walked in, and everything shifted. Sophie had a vibrant energy that could light up the darkest room, while Emma possessed a quiet confidence that drew you in. I'm not sure if it was the alcohol or the way I had been feeling, but when they came over to our table and began chatting, I felt a spark of life return for the first time in ages. Initially, our conversation was light and friendly, just typical bar banter. But as the drinks flowed, the atmosphere grew, flirtatious. Honestly, it felt exhilarating. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I felt desired, something that had long been missing in my relationship with Claire. The more we conversed, the more I sensed a genuine attraction building between us. By the end of the evening, Sophie and Emma made it clear they weren't just after casual conversation. They were interested in me, in each other, and in something far beyond small talk. They were bold, confident, and unafraid to express their thoughts. For the first time since that disastrous dinner with Claire, I felt empowered. I felt like I had a choice. So, I took that leap. I decided to pursue something with them. It wasn't about love or romance. It was about reclaiming my freedom. It was about doing something for myself for a change instead of constantly worrying about Claire and her nonsense. I felt as though I was recovering a piece of myself that had been missing for far too long, and I approached it with intention. Things escalated quickly between the three of us. We'd meet whenever we could, sometimes all together, sometimes just two of us. It was messy and chaotic, but also thrilling. And God, it was a blast. I would go out with them, immersing myself in the excitement, and for those hours I could forget about Claire, her lies, and Mark. It felt like I was living a double life, and for the first time, it felt like I was winning. But I wasn't merely engaging in this to get back at Claire. No, I had a plan, a way to ensure she faced the consequences for her actions. I spoke to Sophie and Emma about recording our encounters. It was an awkward discussion, but I laid out my reasons. Surprisingly, they were both in agreement. Maybe they'd experienced similar betrayals, or maybe they just didn't want to get tangled up in the drama. Either way, they were willing to assist me with what I dubbed my insurance policy. Each time we met, we made sure to document everything. Not some blurry, half-hearted video. No, we did it right. Clear, undeniable footage that captured everything in vivid detail. Initially, having the camera there felt odd, but soon it just became part of the experience. Knowing I had these recordings, this secret weapon against Claire, filled me with a sense of power I hadn't felt in a long time. I knew it wasn't the most honorable course of action. Part of me loathed myself for sinking to her level. But at the same time, I couldn't allow her to get away with this. I couldn't let her destroy our marriage, make a fool out of me, and then walk away as if she were the innocent party. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd show her just how messy things could get. And so, day by day, week by week, I played the part of the adoring husband, all while keeping my secrets tightly sealed. I'd smile at her, laugh at her jokes, and pretend everything was perfectly fine. But in my mind, I was counting down the days until I was ready to make my move, to confront her with the truth, and ensure that the fantasy she thought she was living came crashing down around her. Because here's the thing about revenge. It's most effective when served cold. And when the moment arrived, I intended to make sure she experienced every chilling second of it. The days leading up to our final confrontation felt like standing on the precipice of a cliff, peering down at the chaos below, knowing a leap was imminent. I was done pretending, done playing the role of the oblivious husband, done ignoring the nonsense Claire had thrown my way. The videos were ready, my resolve was ironclad, and the countdown to the end of our marriage had officially begun. Claire had no idea that the night she walked in would mark the last time she came home to business as usual. She strolled in like it was just another day, casually dropping her bag on the counter, kicking off her shoes, and seemingly carefree. Meanwhile, I had already queued up the videos on my phone, each one a meticulously recorded snapshot of my time with Sophie and Emma, moments that would shatter the fantasy world Claire had created for herself. She barely acknowledged me before darting upstairs to change. That's when I made my move. I sent the text, no words, just a link. One by one, the videos began to send, the tiny progress bar inching along my screen like a slow, deliberate countdown. I could almost envision her expression as she read the messages. First, confusion, then disbelief, and finally, the gut-wrenching realization of exactly what she was looking at. I waited. It was only a matter of seconds before I heard her phone ping from the other room. I didn't say a word. I just listened as she returned downstairs, her footsteps slowing with each notification that chimed in succession. Ping, ping, ping. And then silence. A thick, suffocating silence that filled the air, foreshadowing the storm that was about to break. It didn't take long. She'd seen the videos. I heard her scream from the living room, a raw, primal sound that seemed to erupt from the depths of her being. "Ryan, what the hell is this?" she yelled, charging into the room, phone clutched tightly in her trembling hand, her eyes wild with fury. I didn't flinch. I simply sat there, locking eyes with her as she held the phone up to my face, as if demanding an explanation for what I had sent her. "Oh, that?" I replied, keeping my voice steady and almost nonchalant. "I just thought you'd like to see what exploration looks like." She was furious, and honestly, I had never seen her like this before. Her face was flushed, tears brimming in her eyes, and she was shaking with rage. "You bastard!" she spat. "You're cheating on me? You're sleeping with other women behind my back? How could you do this to me?" She screamed so loudly that I was sure the neighbors could hear. But I didn't care. Let them listen. Let the entire world know. I stood up, finally unleashing all the anger I had bottled up for weeks. "Cheating on you?" I yelled back, incredulous. "Really, Claire? That's rich coming from someone who's been sleeping with Mark. Someone who's been scheming to bring another man into our bed and call it a threesome. You think I didn't know? You think I'm an idiot?" She froze for just a moment. In that instant, I caught a glimpse of guilt flash across her face, a flicker of fear in her eyes that she was cornered. But she didn't relent. "That was different," she shouted, defiance creeping back into her voice. "That was about us, about trying to fix things, trying to add some excitement to our marriage. It wasn't like this. It wasn't betrayal." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, angry laugh that erupted from the depths of my chest. "Fix things? You thought you could fix things by sleeping with another guy? And you believe that makes you innocent?" I was shouting now, pacing the living room as she stood there, clutching her phone as if it were a shield. "Spare me the excuses, Claire. You weren't trying to spice things up. You were looking for a way to cheat, and you thought slapping the label of experiment on it would make it acceptable." "Shut up," she screamed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Just shut up, Ryan. You don't understand anything. You have no idea what it's like to feel trapped in a marriage where you're not getting what you need. You don't know how hard this has been." "Yeah?" I shot back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And sleeping with some guy on the side was your brilliant solution. Jesus, Claire, you could have just talked to me. But no, you chose to go behind my back, lie to my face, and expect me to just go along like some fool." That was her breaking point. The tears flowed harder, and she sank onto the couch, her hands trembling as she struggled to find the right words. "I'm sorry," she murmured, barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to do. I thought if we tried something new." "Save it," I interrupted sharply. "It doesn't matter anymore. You made your choice. You chose to lie, to cheat, and to destroy whatever trust we had left. So don't stand there and try to play the victim. You've lost that privilege." The argument escalated, both of us hurling accusations and shouting over one another, unearthing every unresolved issue from the past decade that we had never truly confronted. Each word felt like a dagger, cutting deeper into wounds that were already raw. In that moment, it was as if all the love, history, and shared memories between us were drowned out by anger and betrayal. There was no turning back, no apologies, no makeups, no "let's work this out." Eventually, we both reached a breaking point. She sat there, sobbing into her hands, while I stood across the room, staring at the wall as if it held the answers I desperately needed. And that's when the truth slipped out, not in anger or as a threat, but as a quiet, undeniable reality. "I want a divorce." She looked up, her eyes puffy and red, her face a chaotic blend of tears, anger, and hurt. "Is that truly what you want?" she whispered, her voice quivering. "After everything, are we just going to throw it all away?" "There's nothing left to salvage," I replied, feeling the heaviness of my words envelop me like a shroud. "You've made sure of that." And just like that, the decision was final, the line drawn, and any future we might have shared crumbled into dust. I had no idea what came next. I didn't know how the divorce would unfold, who would take what, or how we'd untangle the lives we'd woven together. All I was certain of was that it was over. From here on out, everything would be on my terms, not hers. I turned and walked out, leaving her alone with her tears, her deceit, and whatever regret she might have begun to feel. As I closed the door behind me, an odd, empty calm washed over me. The storm had passed, and all that remained was the debris. But at least now I knew where I stood, and I was prepared for whatever lay ahead. After our explosive confrontation, Claire and I existed in a strange limbo. It felt like we were two strangers inhabiting the same house, and each day felt like a ticking time bomb. I knew things would get ugly, but I didn't anticipate her to escalate things to this level. But really, I shouldn't have been surprised. She was angry, hurt, and desperate for revenge, and I had given her all the ammunition she needed. It all began a few days later. I woke up one morning to a deluge of notifications on my phone, texts, missed calls, and alerts lighting up my social media. I knew, even before opening any of them, that she had done something. My heart raced as I braced myself for the fallout. And sure enough, there it was, the videos. The same videos I'd sent to Claire, the proof of my escapades with Sophie and Emma, sent out to our friends, acquaintances, and even her family. It felt like she had been waiting for the perfect moment to pull the pin on the grenade and blow my world apart. The messages were relentless. Initially, there was shock. Friends reached out, asking what the hell was happening. People who hadn't spoken to me in ages, suddenly interested in my personal drama. And the comments. Oh, the comments. Everyone had something to say. "What's your side of the story, man? How could you do that to Claire? You're disgusting, cheating on your wife like that." I'll admit it. At first, it felt like the walls were closing in on me. My phone buzzed continuously, every notification landing like another punch to the gut, every call a harsh reminder of how swiftly things could spiral out of control. I could almost hear the whispers behind my back, the clinks of gossip being poured like cheap wine at every social gathering we had ever attended. For a moment, I truly believed she had won, that she had managed to humiliate me, turning me into the villain in this twisted narrative. But then, unexpectedly, the dust began to settle, and I started hearing the other side. Support. It came from places I hadn't anticipated. A few friends reached out, not to judge me, but to laugh. "Dude, I had no idea you had it in you," one guy texted. "Can't blame you," said another. "Claire always was a handful, huh?" It was surreal, realizing that the world I thought would turn against me was actually somewhat on my side. Some of the guys even called me a legend, and while they said it jokingly, there was a strange sense of camaraderie in it. One of my friends, who'd known Claire as long as I had, candidly told me he'd always found her too controlling, that she'd been playing the victim for far too long. To my surprise, a few women in our circle also reached out, privately confessing they understood my actions, recognizing how Claire had been pushing boundaries and disrespecting our marriage. The more I heard, the more the shame began to dissolve. With it, the guilt faded. I started to realize this situation wasn't as clear-cut as I had thought. Yes, I had gone behind her back. Yes, I had slept with other women. But it wasn't for thrills. I had done it to survive, to reclaim some dignity in a marriage that was decaying from the inside out. What really brought this home was a conversation with one of my closest friends, Jake. He called me one night, right when I was feeling overwhelmed by the chaos. "Listen, man," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "I know you're probably feeling all sorts of emotions right now, but let me tell you something. What you did wasn't pretty, but it was justified. You didn't ask for this. You didn't initiate this mess. She dragged you into it with her lies, and you did what you had to do." Those words resonated deeply. They made me rethink everything, not just the last few weeks, but the last several years. All those times I had bent over backward to keep Claire happy, all the times I had let things slide to maintain peace, all the sacrifices I had made for a woman who clearly didn't care about my happiness. Suddenly, it all felt lighter, like I had been carrying a weight for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to be free. Even as I read the fallout, those messages from Claire where she accused me of ruining her life and turning her into the laughingstock of our social circle, I found it hard to muster any sympathy. Each insult she hurled at me, and every desperate attempt to regain some control, only reinforced my belief that I had made the right decision. I had severed the ties that bound me to her, and there was no turning back now. She attempted to play the martyr, casting herself as the poor, wronged wife whose cheating husband had betrayed her. But no matter how hard she tried to spin the narrative in her favor, the truth was evident, right there in the messages with Mark, in the lies she spun, and in her schemes to turn our marriage into her personal playground while I was expected to sit quietly as the good husband. For once, I genuinely didn't care what others thought. I wasn't concerned about who watched the videos or who whispered about me behind closed doors. Finally, after years of living for someone else, I felt like I was reclaiming my own life. Not the life Claire dictated, not the one I had been pressured into, but my own. And it felt damn good. So sure, maybe I wasn't the perfect husband. Maybe I had made mistakes along the way. But reflecting back, I wouldn't change a single thing. That scandal, our private mess erupting into the public eye, gave me a chance to start fresh. It allowed me to rediscover myself and realize that life after Claire wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was something to embrace and celebrate. And Claire, she was just a chapter in a story that was already moving on. Once she circulated those videos and the drama erupted in our social circle, I knew it was time to officially close the chapter on us. The scandal had laid everything bare, and there was no point in pretending any longer. I filed for divorce. What seemed like a straightforward decision in my mind turned into a long and ugly battle. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Every conversation felt like I was trudging through a war zone. Claire was relentless, determined to take everything, the house, the money, anything she could wield as a weapon against me for daring to break free. She came at me with a ferocity I hadn't anticipated, her lawyer tossing out demands and accusations like confetti. At times, I almost couldn't recognize the woman I had spent over a decade with, but I stayed calm. I knew what I wanted: freedom. And the only way to achieve that was to stay the course, regardless of how many times Claire tried to drag me back into her chaos. I wasn't alone in this fight. Sophie and Emma stood by me every step of the way. It wasn't solely about revenge anymore. They were my friends, my confidants, the ones who reminded me that life could indeed be better without the lies and manipulation. They encouraged me to focus on myself, to view the divorce not as a defeat but as a new beginning. And so, I embraced that new beginning. As the legal battles raged on, I gradually began to rebuild my life. I dove into hobbies I had neglected for years, playing guitar, hiking, and even cooking, an area Claire had always dominated in our marriage. I started traveling, booking spontaneous trips to cities I'd never visited, making sure to enjoy experiences that were solely about me. For the first time, I was living for myself, not for someone else's approval or expectations. Of course, Claire kept trying to make my life miserable. She bombarded me with furious messages, insisting that I was the one who had ruined her life, dragging our marriage through the mud. But with every insult she flung my way, it only solidified my belief that breaking free was the right choice. I had no anger left for her. I was simply done. Amidst all the chaos and noise, I discovered peace. The day the divorce was finalized felt like liberation. It was akin to stepping out of a dark room and finally basking in sunlight. All the guilt and shame I had harbored for my actions with Sophie and Emma, for exposing Claire's lies, began to evaporate, replaced by the realization that I deserved far better than living under someone else's shadow. I recognized that I wasn't the villain in this tale. I was merely a guy striving to reclaim his life, and that's precisely what I did. I started saying yes to things I had always held back from: new adventures, new faces, new beginnings. My friends noticed the change. They could see that I was different, lighter, and more alive. While I couldn't alter the past, I could choose to move forward, one step at a time. So yeah, maybe it wasn't the cleanest break. Perhaps Claire would always cast herself as the victim, and some people might buy into her story. But at this point, I didn't care anymore. I was free, genuinely free, to be myself and to lead the life I wanted, free from the burdens of lies and betrayal. And that was the sweetest form of revenge: living well, living authentically, and leaving all the toxicity behind. Here's to a fresh start, to forging ahead, and to never looking back.